right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you can hear me well. If you can't, let me know. Should probably increase this. Yeah, let me know if anything's fishy going on. Thanks for joining me, and we're going to discuss some of my experiences with taking Oud lessons. Yeah, let's first get started by going through, some of my story. And I'm sure you can relate. Some people teach themselves music. Some people go to like a Royal Conservatory. Some people study music, get their bachelor degree at university. I personally learned music completely through one-on-one private lessons. The first lessons I went to, I was learning Persian Santor, a hammered dulcimer. I started when I was 10, went for private lessons, and fortunately my teacher really was quite good at teaching the basics of note reading and stuff, so he started me off on that from the very beginning, and I think that really helped my note reading for a long time throughout my life, playing different other instruments and whatnot. So what's your experience learning music or learning an instrument? Nowadays you can learn piano and guitar with like apps and stuff for your tablet and smartphone. Have you ever done that kind of thing before? It's really cool nowadays because there's so many tools that we can use. We can use, visuals with audio, with video tutorials, and apps, and note reading, hearing, listening. So how do you fit in? How do you learn best? And I want to also talk about what a private Oud lesson can do for you, because for me personally, it did a lot. And for example, the first experience I had with a teacher was, of course, learning Santor. I was just a kid, so I didn't really know what was going on. I just kind of followed what was happening. It took a long time for the musical concepts to really sink in, but I was good at following directions. So, I picked up things and followed directions and practiced a little bit, and I did a pretty good job, being 10. I made some progress. One of the cool things about my first teacher was I thought I could do some composition. And my first attempt at composition was premature, to say the least. Like, I really didn't know what I was doing, but I had some ideas were coming to me, and so I guess I tried to scribble them out on paper on a note staff that I had gotten, that I had purchased, and so when I showed that to my teacher, it was really nice because he didn't discourage me. He didn't, put me aside and say, well, don't do that yet. He actually started to help me and correct what I was doing. So that was a big encouragement for me, and it was nice that he didn't, just kind of brush it off. And I'm sure some teachers would be like, well, that's cool, but let's do this instead, I never realized it, but now that I'm thinking back to it, that was a pretty cool thing that he did as a music teacher, to encourage me to continue to write music and not be afraid of doing that kind of thing. So I think that was really huge, big deal. Later on, after went through phases, I took a stab at teaching myself guitar with like a really old-timey method book. And it actually worked. I actually did it. Like, it was one of the greatest learning experiences of my life. I was really inspired. I was really into heavy metal and rock at that time. It was like around when I was 13, 14, or 15. And I had some tools. I had an acoustic guitar sitting around. I had this method book. I put my mind to it, and it paid off. I learned how to play guitar myself. But back then, I didn't really have any discipline because I was just a teenager. I didn't really have any discipline to follow through thoroughly, so it really helped that I took some guitar lessons, and having a teacher really helped push me to finish that method book. Later on, I joined high school band thinking I could play guitar, but it turned out that there's no room for a guitar player in concert band. but they needed a trombone player. So I thought trombone was kind of cool. So I said, why not? I really wanted to play music in a band, and it turned out to be another great learning experience. My band teacher actually taught me how to play trombone during class, and after a few sessions, she eventually incorporated me into the band. And I was fumbling around and didn't really know what I was doing, but I had to relearn reading music because I had to learn how to read bass clef. So I was fumbling around for a while until I really got my bearings. So I realized then that you can really learn anything if you put your mind to it, and you can teach it too, even if you aren't the best at it. Like, teaching and performing are different skill sets, but of course they're complementary in music. For example, my band teacher, she was a pianist and a flautist, but she knew how to blow a horn, and she knew how to help me make music on it too. So she had me playing trombone in no time, and I was really surprised by that. So these were all kind of transformative experiences for me. They were like little breakthroughs in my awareness here and there, which continue to serve me as a oud teacher and a performer. So now enters the oud. Like later on as a teenager, I really got into oud, and it was always haunting me, so I really had to learn it at some point. And now oud is my main focus, and it's been with me throughout that time, through the first time that I ever heard the oud. It's been with me since that time. So my first oud teacher was Hossein Behrzenia, a very well-known Persian barbat, Persian oud style player. And he's quite famous. He's one of the most famous Iranian oud players. He eventually settled in Vancouver, Canada, and so I was lucky enough to start taking lessons with him. His style was very cool and collected. There were sometimes some lessons where he wouldn't even play the oud. He wouldn't even pick it up. He would just sit beside me and watch what I'm doing and let me work things out, give me instructions, give me guidance here and there. And so that was his style. He was very encouraging too. It helped that I had already learned Persian music to some degree, so my progress was quite fast. I already knew music in and out by that time, but learning the oud technique-wise, that was new to me. Learning a fretless instrument for the first time, that was also new as well. Then years later, after I felt like I had a good grasp on the oud, I came up against another new thing in my music career, and that was Arabic and Turkish music. Up until that time, I was a Persian musician, strictly Persian music on the oud, on Santor, and Arabic and Turkish music were hugely foreign to me. I could hear the overlapping similarities between Persian music and Arabic music and Turkish music, but I could not for the life of me seem to replicate the improvisational style of Arabic players. I would always continue to revert back to my Persian style of playing. And, in Persian music we improvise a lot, very heavily. Some masters, their concerts are heavily like 80% improvisation. And so improvisation was already strong with me, but not the Arabic style. There's so much modulation in Arabic style playing, and in Turkish style playing there's different type of energy, there's a different type of vibe. So I felt that at a certain point, like I'm not getting anywhere by listening and trying to copy, that I needed to take some lessons. I needed to talk to somebody. I needed to get in front of somebody and learn. So that was another breakthrough. I decided to seek out a teacher that could teach me a little bit about Arabic taqsim. And so I found a Turkish Iraqi oudist, Serwan Yamolki. He was living in one of the suburbs of Vancouver. And I took one lesson with him, and it was just enough to give me the context I needed to figure out what was happening in Arabic style oud taqsim. Unfortunately, I never got to go back for another lesson because it was so far away from where I lived, so it wasn't really practical for me. But the tips and the guidance that he gave me were enough to get me started and to get me going with what I was hearing. And so after that, I was largely self-taught with Arabic music until I started attending the Arabic music retreat later on, and started to play with some musicians who knew more about Arabic music than I did. It was really fortunate that I took that one lesson. Otherwise, Arabic style takasim and improvisation would still be very foreign to me. A couple things about that lesson stood out for me that I'll share with you now. One thing he reminded me during the lesson that my Persian style playing would never completely disappear. He said, like, that's in your blood. That's not gonna. It's in your musical education. It's also in your blood. It's not gonna go away. And that was really nice to hear that, because it helped me accept that what my playing was for what it is, and avoid the thought that I had that I need to become something else. I need to do this. I need to do it this way in order to emulate the Arabic style. But it was good because I started to avoid the thinking that I need to become something I'm not. I had to, be straight up with the fact that I'm a Persian musician, and I'm coming to Arabic music from a Persian background. And so a lot of that is going to stay there. It's not, you can't erase it. A lot of people come from Western music where they're used to harmony, they're used to chords and whatnot, and they're used to a different type of solo improvisation style. The only soloing that really happens in Western music comes from blues and jazz, which ultimately have roots from modal music. And so that's where the connection lies. And so, coming from Western background, that's going to stay with you. You got to accept that fact that it's going to stay with you, and your music is going to stay that way. And but you can emulate. Over time, you can emulate. But some things are going to come back from your Western upbringing. That's fine. You got to accept that, and you got to go along with that. You got to use the strengths that you got from Western music, from whatever background you come from. And yeah, so I'm just taking a look at the chat, so I'll answer a couple questions. That's cool. So someone learned double bass at university and learned Oud from lessons on the internet. That's awesome. Do I still play Santor? Yeah, I don't play Santor anymore. I decided back around 2014 or so that I would strictly focus on playing Oud. And the reason for that was I was playing with the Vancouver Intercultural Orchestra, and they were getting me to play Santor and Oud in like one concert. So it was very tough to keep up. As you know, tuning a Santor is tuning like 70 strings, and you got to tune each one manually. So it was too much to do. My heart was more into Oud too, and I felt like I needed to really focus. A lot of the pieces that were being played were very avant-garde, so like very, very, like it's very hard to play that stuff on Oud and do it well, or at least do it to a standard that they were expecting. So I decided I really got to focus on playing Oud, playing where my heart is, and so I don't play anymore. If I could pick it up and play some traditional Persian stuff, but I don't anymore. I chose to focus on Oud from that point on. Yeah. So that's about it for that. There are some old videos of me playing Santor on YouTube from an old channel that I have. You could probably find that if you dig deep enough. Yeah, so let's go on here. So I wanted to talk about a little bit of the differences between, learning from apps, video tutorials, Skype, and Zoom. There's a lot of benefits, of course, from learning online. You can learn a lot. Like I said, I learned a lot of Arabic and Turkish style completely online until I went to this one lesson with Serwan, which taught me a lot. Oh yeah, I wanted to discuss that. So a couple of things, of the things that he said in the lesson. One of them was, your Persian style is not going to go away very easily. It's going to stay with you. So another thing that he taught me was having a rich ending. And this became very obvious after listening to Takasim by Farid al-Atrash. So, of course, the typical way that Farid finishes his Takasim is with a nice, rich, fantastic, dynamic ending. So I'll change the volume here on the oud. The oud might be a bit loud. So, he'll be playing something. He'll be playing something like that to finish off his Takasim. But Persian improvisation is completely different. Like, you develop very slowly. The melodies are not so dynamic. They develop slower, So, like a typical finale in Persian music would be very meditative and much longer drawn out. So something very, very sweet and short like that. We call this, in Farsi, furud. And furud means coming back to the source of the root of the scale or the maqam, the mode, the daska that you're playing. So, for example, in something comparable to maqam bayati, we have avaz abu ata in Persian music. So a little phrase might end like that. Very simple, and would end on the root of the daska or whatever mode you're playing. Very different from the high energy kind of taksim that Farid al-Atrash would play, It gets really dynamic, goes into different places, does some modulations. He'll do something like that. So that's just a little example of the differences between style and what I had to pick up and what I had to learn. And so very different. So coming from completely different mindset of improvising and what to do and how to end, how to finish, and where to go. So those were some of the things that I picked up from that one lesson, and they were really useful for me. And so there are some problems, though, that you come up against, some roadblocks. Learning online, it's much cheaper to learn online. That's great. And you can go at your own pace, and you always have access to the tutorials, and they're convenient that way. The problem with these tools is no one's going to really hold you accountable other than yourself. There's no human involved in making sure that you're doing everything correctly. So it takes a lot of discipline, you can imagine. And if you encounter a roadblock, it might be difficult to get over it by yourself. You may quit, you may not have the motivation. You don't have somebody every week that you're going to that's going to help you and show you a tip here and there to help you get over that stumbling block. And Skype and Zoom lessons, of course, have their drawbacks too. For example, I can't reach through the screen, tune up your instrument when it's out of tune. You have to do that yourself. So you need to have a bit of backbone to be able to get some of the things done yourself with some guidance. And so when it comes to holding the instrument, some beginners find it challenging to do, online lessons, because they don't, sometimes for the oud, you have to physically change the way the student is holding the instrument. Over Zoom and Skype, I can only remind you to hold it a certain way and give you some guidance there. But I think when it comes to taking lessons, if you take feedback seriously and try to correct your mistakes, I think learning on Skype and Zoom can really speed up your learning and perhaps give you some breakthroughs that I have perhaps that I've myself experienced from taking lessons. So for those of you who are watching, if you could put in the comments, talk about what are some of the breakthroughs that you had, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit and comment. I'm sure other people would benefit from the comments that you put in there, if you don't mind. We can discuss that a little bit. So those were some of the breakthroughs I had. And while you're getting your thoughts down, I'll just play a little bit of Oud and mention the fact that I've got this August we're going to do a deal on Skype Oud lessons and Zoom lessons for private Oud lessons for me. So I'm going to put a link to my calendar in the description, and so that you can check this out and get the details. So this month we're going to be opening up a bunch of slots for Oud lessons, and usually my Oud lessons are $50 each for 45 minutes to 50-minute Oud lesson, but this August they're all going to be 20% off, so each lesson is going to be $40, and so they're going to be fully customizable. We'll address any questions you have about the Oud, and any problems that you're going through, whether you need exercises, you can do that. Whether you want to learn a particular song, we might be able to do that too, given if there's enough time to do that. So I want to offer some customizable things and get people to have some breakthroughs on their own, whether they're just coming from one lesson or a couple lessons in August. I want to be able to help you get through those roadblocks with the Oud, and so that you kind of get to somewhere that get over your plateau or have some tips that you can work towards working on. So let's see. So a couple of simple questions from Lewis. How much does an Oud cost, and what's the difference between a guitar and the Oud? Lots of differences. Oud is fretless, so there's no easy points to put on the Oud. So like a guitar has lines here and things that you press down, and it cuts off where the Oud is, where the string is vibrating. But the Oud doesn't have any, so you can play any note that exists here. That's one of the differences between guitar and Oud. Another difference is that Oud playing is mostly about melody. You're playing melodies on the Oud, like a violin plays melodies. You're not playing chords, harmony, and you're not doing any of that kind of so many arpeggios and chord things. You're focusing on the melody, and it takes a lot of focus to do the melody on a fretless instrument. You gotta be there, be aware of where your fingers are, because pitch and the slight differences of pitch can really affect your playing. So I find for myself, once the muscle memory kicks in, it's much easier, but I still have to really focus and make sure that I'm playing the right notes. That's one of the things about the Oud. The differences between Oud and guitar, a slightly different range, but they're close in range. The low notes and the high notes, the range is about the same. But yeah, the tuning is a little bit different as well. We tune mostly in fourths, so C, G, D, A, and the bass notes are variable. Ouds can cost anywhere from like $500 USD to and up. There's really expensive Ouds out there. Most of the decent playable Ouds for beginners that you can buy are around $500 to $1,000. And there's some regional differences between Oud as well. So I'm gonna put my my calendar link in the description so that you can get it and check it out. Check out the slots available. and you can just go to the page there and select your time zone, and the time slots that are available will show up accordingly. So there's I'm saving that. I don't know how quickly it will show up on the details in the description, but I'll also put it in the chat as well. And we do all the payment over PayPal. Let's see. We got David here. He emailed me. Yes, nice to see you here, David. And yeah, so could you talk about the Persian music dynamic? So very slow development, slow melodic development. Kind of goes more deeper into the scale, or we call it a daska. So daska literally means hand system. And so it's the system of the way your hand moves along the fingerboard, really. And so the improvisational dynamic, you always start at the base, at the basic root of the musical system you're starting. Let's say you start on something like Makam Bayati, Avaz Abu Ata, starts here. The main root of it is between these four notes, this tetrachord. That's a little intro to Avaz Abu Ata. So then we have certain notes that get paused on more often than others. For example, we have different notes, terms for them, and one of the notes in Abu Ata is the half flat or the quarter flat second degree. In this case, I'm playing Abu Ata on D, and so E quarter flat or E half flat is my half flat second degree. So sometimes you'll hear melodies that'll pause on this note before going down to the root of the daska. Take a sip of water here. So we have a system in place called the radif. Radif means a line, and these are melodies that are pre-composed melodies handed down from master to apprentice from hundreds of years ago. We don't know exactly how old some of them are. But they were compiled over like 150 years ago, and they were systematized. And so students of Persian music, eventually, once their technique gets up to a certain level, they learn these, and they learn them in a sequence. So radif means that sequence. And so these different little compositions have different themes, and so these themes are chosen by people who are improvising, and they're elaborated on. So for example, one theme in Abu Ata, the melody starts to focus around the fifth. Before it goes back down to the root of the daska. So these different melodies are used in improvisation. They're used as inspiration for improvisation. Some are omitted in performance, and some are used more often in performance. There's certain melodies that are more important than others, and we use those to develop the melody, similar to the way that a chord progression develops. Um, Different melodies have different feelings associated with them. And so we go through those in a sequence, and we always come back to the root of the daska after developing this. So this can happen over a whole performance, like 45 minutes. This can happen over a short period of time. There may be returns to the root many times throughout a performance, and there's just so much that you can do. There's so much creativity that you can have in using the radif system. And once you go through that and learn that and digest the melodies, then it becomes part of you, and that becomes part of your repertoire. For example, for me, I use these melodies as inspiration. Like there's one melody that pauses on the B flat. This is in a different daska than Abu Ata, but it's similar. But the melody pauses on that B flat. But it has a relationship to the overall system, the overall daska. The daska also can be translated as system. So it has a relationship with that. And so they're all connected in some way, in some logic. And learning that whole radif system, you can learn the logic that is used there in a much more formal way than, for example, Arabic music is. There's a lot more freedom in Arabic style improvisation, I think, and it differs from region to region. Some areas they improvise a certain way, some areas improvise a different way. And over time, over the last century, things have evolved, and certain modulations have become in vogue, and other modulations have dropped out of practice, or different ways of playing and different ways of improvising have just died off. So who knows how many things have changed since 1,000 years ago. This music that we're trying to carry on, this tradition. A lot of things have changed in the last 100 years. And who knows how it's changed in the last 1,000 years. But some things have stayed the same. So yeah, that's some of the dynamic of Persian music. Of course, it goes into a lot more detail than what I can explain right now. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that. If there's any other questions, I'd love to hang out and answer any other more questions you have about taking oud lessons or oud music, anything. Yeah. So let's see here. So that was a little short improvisation in Avaz Dashti in Persian music. And you can see how the melodies are a bit more sparse, and so they develop a bit differently than in Arabic music, and there's a lot more space between the notes. There's a lot more pausing, I find. Um, yeah, there's just a completely different vibe to the music, and so those are some of the things that you can pick up from like a private lesson. So, all right, some questions here. So, what strings are you using? I like pyramid lute and Kirschner. Both seem to be of great quality. Yeah, I use a lot of different variations of strings. Right now on this oud, I have higher tension pyramid set on there, and on my other oud right now I have Turkish set of D'Addario. I really like D'Addario strings. I think they really sound nice on my Yildirim oud. And sometimes I use their Arabic set. Sometimes I mix and match a little bit some of the strings. On one of my ouds, I really like Aquila, sorry, and I will need to get a new set of Kirschner. I want to try Kirschner again on my Yildirim oud. Yeah, they're great. They're great quality. A lot of the oud strings out there are great quality. Daniel Mari strings are great quality and really cheap, really inexpensive. And yeah, so you just gotta experiment and find out what oud strings really sound the best on your oud. So how many scales does Persian music use, more or less? So we've got, let's see. So we've got Shur, and then we've got Homayun, Chaharga, Nava, Ras Panjga, and then we have some Avaz Esfahan, so 6, and then we have some sub modes of Shur, Afshari, Dashti, Abu Atta, and Bayat Torque. So you got about like 9 or 10 there that you use, and some of them are even the same intervals, but because of where the scale actually begins, or where the focus note begins, the vibe is completely different. For example, this is a great example. Avaz Abu Atta. It starts here. The root of it is really here, in between these 4 notes. Now, and the upper tetrachord, very similar to Makam Bayati. Anyway, Dasgah Nava is the exact same intervals, but the focus is on G. See, there's gravity, there's weight. The weight is on G, and the focus point. It's like planets revolving around a sun. We're revolving around that G. And there's different notes that are paused on in that interval, in those intervals. So that's some of the differences between one Daska to another, and how they're different. Another difference, we have Homayun and Esfahan. The intervals are basically the same, but the way you play them and the feeling is completely different. Like in Homayun, we would start here. So then Esfahan focuses on G instead of D. And so different melodies are created under these circumstances, and different notes are focused on under these circumstances when you change the focus, when you change the focal point, and it gets very complicated from there. But that's some of the examples of some of the differences there. You talk about the difference between ouds with 9 strings and ouds with 11 strings. So there's not much difference between most ouds. The basic oud string should be 10 strings. You've got these basic courses: C, G, D, A, and then you have one bass course, which can be tuned to F or G or E. That's the basic thing. Now, later on, they added a bass note. It's for optional nuances and embellishments and ornaments that you can do, and also to emphasize different maqam that you're playing. So those are some of the differences. The basic oud technique happens on the oud on 4 strings: C, G, D, A. The most ancient oud was probably just 4 strings, and everything happened there. Adding the bass notes gives you a little bit more. They're optional. Gives you a little bit more range, as well as being able to focus on different notes. For example, if you're playing a scale in F, and you have a bass note tuned to F, you can emphasize that F a lot more, and it's nice. So those bass notes can help augment your music. Yeah, so like I said, this month offering some discounts on Oud lessons, and the link is in the description. The link is in the chat. Like I said, we're promoting doing $40 each lesson. In the details on the calendar, it does say $50, but you'll get your lesson for $40 as a promo this month. So I hope you enjoyed this YouTube live, and if you have any questions, always email me at support@oudforguitarists.com. I'll put that in the description there. Email me if you have any questions, want to go deeper, if you want to set up a lesson, if there are any times that are on the calendar that don't work for you, and I'll see what I can do, and maybe I can open up something for you. And yeah, I'd love to meet with you and help you overcome any challenges you have with the oud. So thanks for joining me today, and we'll talk to you next time. All right.